Do you see any werewolves? I don't see any werewolves. Do you see any werewolves? I don't see any werewolves. I dare you to take a step forward. We were playing the werewolf game. Now, it's not that I meant to scare my best friend to death. It's just we got taken over by a kind of greater power. The summer I was 10, that power was dark shadows. Soap opera. Back then, now it's been remade as a movie, but we knew it as a soap opera. The Collins family, they lived in Maine, they were very rich, and they did all the things that soap opera families do. They fought, they fell in love, sometimes they, kissed. Ugh. But the reason we all raced home in time to plonk down in front of the TV with snack at 4:30 every afternoon when dark shadows came on is because the Collins family, in addition to being very rich and living in Maine, they were werewolves and vampires and witches. And that was entertainment. I was totally in love with Quentin Collins, who was the dashing young heir to the Collins estate. He had beautiful curly brown hair and big brown eyes and these glorious 1970s mutton chop sideburns. They were just works of art. And they came in handy because members of the Collins family were always time traveling back and forth between 1970 and the 1800s. So Quentin's facial hair worked in both eras. It was very convenient, as did his plaid leisure suit that he usually sported. So totally in love with Quentin. The only problem with Quentin was that he did happen to be a werewolf. So if you were on a date with him and the moon was full, he would tear you into little bits. But he had a good heart, and he tried to protect people from his animal instincts. So every month when the moon turned full, he would have a friend take him into the Collins family cemetery, into the mausoleum, the little stone building where the coffins rest above ground. And Quentin would step up into the mausoleum. His friend would clang, slam the iron gate closed, lock him in. And then you would see Quentin's hands coming out around the iron bars. The camera would shoot up to the moon, full in the sky. Ow! Cut back to Quentin's hands, and they would be sprouting fur and claws as he turned into a wolf. Ah! They always did this on Friday, always. So then they'd cut to the closing credits, and we were left the whole weekend. What's going to happen? So of course we couldn't leave it there. Hence, the werewolf game. This was our way of carrying the story forward. And very conveniently, the little town where I grew up, Marietta, Pennsylvania, I grew up in a house right across the street from the town cemetery, full of leaning old tombstones. It was surrounded by this black iron gate, fence with a gate that went when you opened it, and there was a mausoleum right in the middle of the cemetery, just like the Collins family had. So we would play the werewolf game. Rules were very simple. You went into the cemetery, and then you dared each other to go up to the mausoleum. And whoever was brave enough to actually get close enough that you could look in the window and see if there was a werewolf inside, won. That person would then scream, "I am the werewolf," and chase all the rest of us. If you made it back to my side yard and grabbed the bushes, you were safe before the werewolf got you. But at night, of course, we were much too scared to go into the cemetery. So then we had a nighttime version of the game. And that's what we were playing the night we got taken over by the greater power and everything went terribly wrong. It was me, my best friend Paula, and Paula's older sister, Catherine. Catherine was a year older. So when she decided to play with us, we were always trying to impress her with how cool we were, which is why we were playing the werewolf game, even though we were usually too scared to play it even at night. So there we were, lined up, me, Paula, Catherine. We were in my side yard, our backs to the bushes, looking at the cemetery. Catherine started, "Do you see any werewolves?" "I don't see any werewolves." "Do you see any werewolves?" "I don't see any werewolves." "I dare you to take a step forward." We all took one big step forward toward the cemetery. Then it was Paula's turn. "Do you see any werewolves?" "I don't see any." "Do you?" Another big step. Now, Catherine and I did not plan what happened next. We were not vicious children. We just got swept away. I said, Do you see anywhere? I dare you to take a step forward. And as Paula was taking the requisite step forward, I caught Catherine's eye behind Paula's back. And while Paula took a huge step forward, Catherine and I took a huge step back. Then Catherine did the question, and once again Paula took a giant step forward, and Catherine and I took a giant step back. And the third time, Paula took a step so big that she almost ended up in the cemetery. I mean, she was right on the edge, looking for the werewolf. Catherine and I took a huge step back and ducked down behind the bushes so we were completely out of sight. And then someone, I don't know who, it was probably Catherine, went, "Ow!" Paula leapt up in the air, came back down, looked. Her sister and her best friend were gone, they'd vanished, and there was a werewolf right behind her. "Ah!" She started to scream, she started to run. "Ah!" By the bushes. "Ah!" Crunch, crunch, crunch across the gravel driveway. "Ah!" Crunch, crunch, crunch around the side yard. "Ah!" To our side door. Boom, boom, boom. "Ah! What?" Catherine and I were in hysterics. Can you believe it? Can you believe it? Did you hear? Ah! She jumped out of the sofa. Ah! Which, we might as well enjoy ourselves as long as we could, because sooner or later we had to pull ourselves together, go in the house, and find that Paula had taken refuge in a power even greater than a werewolf, my mom. Paula was sitting on the counter. Mom was making her hot chocolate. Paula had a big wad of tissues in her hand, and she was really looking pretty happy when we came in the door. And the minute she saw us, I was so scared. Mom went over, "Oh, honey, it's all right. You're safe now." And she hugged Paula. Paula stuck her tongue out at Catherine and me over my mom's shoulder. Catherine and I did not get hot chocolate. We got a big lecture. And we had no excuse. We had nothing to say for ourselves. The only thing I could say is, "Well, dark shadows made us do it," which cut no ice with my mother. So for our punishment, for the whole rest of the evening, we had to play whatever game Paula wanted. And even worse than that, we had to play the game according to Paula's rules. It was torture. But ever since then, I have remembered that there is no greater power in this life or any life hereafter, no power greater than the power of Mom. Little orphan Annies come to our house to stay and wash the cups and saucers up and brush the crumbs away and shoo the chickens off the porch and brush the hearth and sweep and make the fire and bake the bread and earn her board and keep. But all us other children, when the supper things is done, we gather round the kitchen fire and we has the mostest fun a-listening to the witch tales that Annie tells about, and the goblins that'll get ya if you don't watch out. Once there was a little boy wouldn't say his prayers, and when he went to bed at night away upstairs, his mama heard him holler and his daddy heard him bawl. But when they turned the covers down, he wasn't there at all. And they seeked him in the rafters, in the cupboard room and press, and they seeked him up the chimney flue and everywhere, I guess. But all they ever found were just his clothes turned inside out. 'Cause the goblins will get ya if you don't watch out. And once there was a little girl who'd always laugh and grin and make fun of everyone, all her blood and kin. And once, when there was company and old folks was there, she mocked 'em and she shocked 'em, and she said she didn't care. But just as she kicked up her heels to turn to run and hide, there came two great big gray things a-standing by her side, and they whisk her through the chimney, for she knowed what she's about. 'Cause the goblins'll get ya if you don't watch out. And little Orphan Annie says, when the blaze burns blue, and the lamp wick sputters, and the wind goes ooh, and the crickets chirp, and the moon turns gray, and the lightning bugs with dew is all squinched away, then you better mind your parents and your teachers fond and dear, and comfort them what loves you, and dry the orphan's tear, and help the poor and needy ones that cluster all about, or the goblins'll get ya if you don't watch out. It was nigh on midnight by the time I finally left the dance at the Grange Hall. Banjo and fiddle still ringing in my ear, I untied my mount, got up, and we started down the road into the woods. Moon was full, splashing silver on the road between the dug fir as we rode deeper and deeper into the forest. I could hear critters rustling on each side and whoo, 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 night birds deep in the forest. We went up a rise and came around, and I saw that the road made a sharp hairpin turn, so I reined in, and as I did, I saw a figure walking down the road. First I thought it was a child, but as I got closer, I realized it was a woman, a young woman, just a little slip of a thing. She had her hair all piled up on her head and long purpley dress on. She was carrying her high-heeled shoes in one hand and just walking barefoot down the road. Hello, I said, not to startle her, but she did not turn around till I came right up beside her. Well, miss, I said, what are you doing out on the road all on your lonesome? Well, I'm just coming from the dance at the Grange Hall, she said. My beau and I had a falling out, so I am walking home on my own. Can I give you a ride the rest of the way? Well, I would appreciate that. Thank you kindly. So I boosted her up behind me on the saddle, and when she put her arms around me to steady herself, ooh, whoa, your hands are cold as ice. Here, you better take my jacket, put it around you. You're going to die of cold before we even get you home. She told me her name was Lavender, and I had noticed when I helped her up that her eyes were beautiful, kind of a grayish purple in the moonlight. I tried a few conversational starters, but she didn't seem inclined to talk, and so we fell into a companionable silence as we rode along. And then behind me I heard, lavender blue, dilly dilly, lavender green, you be my king, dilly dilly, I'll be your queen. Lavender green, dilly dilly, lavender gold, ours is the kind of love that never grows old. And it was like I was in a kind of trance as we were riding along until suddenly I heard her say, okay, this is it, this is where I live, and she was slipping down from the saddle. Well, wait a minute, can't I take you all the way up to your house? Oh no, it's so late. If my parents see me coming in this late, I will catch Dickens. No, thank you kindly, bye. And she was gone, down this little cut-off road that led into the woods. Nothing for it but to go on, and I was just a little ways further when I realized, oh, tarnation, she still has my jacket. Oh. Now, I try not to set too much store on material things, but I was mighty partial to that jacket. It had been given to me by an admirer of whom I was quite fond. And so the next morning, first thing, I got myself up and out and rode back up to Lavender's house to reclaim it. Sure enough, I found the cutoff into the woods, and when I went in, there was a farmhouse, kind of tucked back, kind of desolate looking. The curtains at the windows were in tatters, and there were boards missing from the porch, but there was smoke curling out of the chimney, so I went up and the woman who opened the door looked familiar. She had silver hair piled up on her head, but her eyes were that same silvery purple that I'd seen the night before. "Well, ma'am, my name is Clementine Ryder, and I gave your daughter a ride home from the dance last night, and by mistake, she went off wearing my jacket." The woman just stared at me. "It was just a mistake, ma'am. There's no, if I could just speak to Lavender, I'm sure we'll straighten the whole thing out." "Just a minute," the woman said. She went away, and when she came back, she had a silver-framed photo in her hand. I recognized the girl right away. It was Lavender. She was dressed up for the photo. Her hair was piled up, and she had on an old-fashioned kind of high-neck blouse, but that was her. "Well, yes, indeed. I gave her a ride home last night, ma'am. Is that your daughter?" "That's my daughter. But she's been dead for 20 years. She and her beau were leaving the Grange after a dance one night, and his horse took a fall on that terrible, terrible curve in the road. Lavender was thrown from the saddle. She hit her head on a rock. She died right there, right on the spot." I could not take in what the woman was telling me, but she was so upset that I realized it was time to take my leave, but I couldn't quite let it rest there. "Ma'am, could you tell me where your daughter is buried?" "Down the road, just about a mile, a little cemetery, by the little white church." It wasn't hard to find the cemetery. It was just exactly where the woman described it, and it wasn't hard to find Lavender's grave. It was a simple tombstone, just a plain gray stone, with her name and the dates of her brief life. And on top of that tombstone, neatly folded, was my leather jacket.